Storytelling 101. Welcome to the Rising Tide Live community. We are streaming on LinkedIn. We are on YouTube. We're on Facebook. If you're on LinkedIn, please share this with the community. We want as many people as possible. We are streaming on Riverside, and our goal is to break Riverside. Yes, Riverside, we love you, but we started this community on Clubhouse, which is a social audio app. We moved it to LinkedIn Live. LinkedIn Live decided they're not doing audio rooms anymore, so now we are streaming on as many platforms as possible, and we want to bring up as many guests as possible to talk about storytelling tips. I'm going to start with a quick story. My grandfather, Shawn Walchef, and I worked on this story, a story of my grandfather's life. It's called The Harvest. And this book we wrote together when I was 21 years old. And it's something that is near and dear to my heart because my grandfather at the end of his life wanted to share his story. And in that storytelling process, what I can tell you is the more that you learn about the craft of storytelling, of why it's important to repeat stories and to get better at telling those stories, the better those stories become and the more that people want to share them. A couple nights ago, my son, my 7-year-old boy, Colleen, he came to me and he said, "Dad, I want you to read Grandpa's story." So my grandfather, this book, and I actually started reading the story to my son every night before we go to bed. And it was such a magical moment for me to share the time because I spent 3 years working with my grandfather, and he was so adamant about getting these stories onto paper so that future generations would be able to learn about how he grew up in a Bulgarian village and how he worked so hard and chased his curiosity. Stay curious, get involved, ask for help. These are things that my grandfather taught me, things that I now teach my son. But to think about how do we pass stories on from generation to generation, that's what gets us excited to have this community. We're grateful for everybody that's here. We're going to bring everybody up. So Mike and Stover, go ahead and start bringing in the community so we can get in today's discussion about storytelling. And my number one tip for anybody that's watching this in the future, if you're listening to the digital hospitality feed, we appreciate you. We want you to join us for the live stream. But my number one tip for anybody that's going to be a guest on a podcast, when somebody asks you a question, preface the question. After you get the response, say, "Let me tell you a story." That will trigger you to start to talk about stories. If you're speaking on a stage, "Let me tell you a story." Now, everyone in the audience, they already know what to expect. So that's my number one tip. Welcome to the community, Matt Wampler. Who are you? What are you launching? Are you able to share what you're launching, what you're working on? And tell us the story.
All right. So my name's Matt Wampler. I'm with ClearCogs. We do predictive analytics for restaurants. And I guess since Shawn's already, burying the lead, I'm launching my podcast in the next month or so, where we're going to be telling some stories about AI and restaurants and where this is all going. As far as the story goes, way to put me on the spot. I'd say this, I have a funny connection with stories. My grandmother used to write what she'd call the Tales of Loda. They were little short stories about our childhood adventures that had really happened. And something about that planted a seed in my mind. And it's one of those, we all live our own story. And when you start to kind of look at your life as a story and a narrative, not only does it become a little less stressful, it becomes more fun. And we start to live in that reality, that story we're telling ourselves. So love stories.
Tell us a little bit more about the show. Paint us a story of what is to come. I mean, you've been a part of this community, Matt. I don't remember. Did we meet on a LinkedIn DM? Is that how?
I think that's how we did it.
I think that's how we did it. And I tell you what I tell everybody on all our shows, on all the times I go speaking, but it's the stay curious. Curious people find each other, but it's actually getting involved in doing the work. Like you actually have been doing the work as the CEO, co-founder of a tech company, doing smartphone storytelling in real life to the point where you believe deeply in having a podcast, long form content into short form content so that you can tell not only your story, but more importantly, the story of AI, the story of technology, the story of building community. Share a little bit about that, please.
I think that we tell a lot of stories about the present. What is happening? People pitching their companies, talking about, what's going on, what they're doing in the next month. I think we do a really poor job in the industry about talking about what has happened in the past, why the industry is the way it is, and what the industry is going to look like in the future. And I don't just mean 6 months from now, but in the next 5 or 10 years. Where are we allocating capital to from a investment perspective, on the technology side? Where are operators? How are they building their operations today around where it's going to be 5 years from now? I think those are the stories that are not being told today that I really want to go tell.
It's super exciting. I think that's one of the reasons why, I mean, we talk about podcasting all the time and why it gives you the opportunity to literally become your own media company. But so many people say, oh, everyone has a podcast, and there's only 3 million podcasts. But to the point of like, I'm so excited for you and this series because you get to have conversations that are uniquely you chasing your curiosity.
Well, let me
You
just say this. It was your story about being a barbecue operator and going into this media world and what it's done for you that has inspired me to do it. I'm following in your footsteps here. So thank you for being out there and telling your story, because it does have real life ramifications.
Well, I appreciate it. And it's, that's the essence of this community. A rising tide lifts all ships. And I've had mentors and podcasters that I've looked up to. And now I'm looking up to YouTubers and trying to figure out how do we better tell stories that are deep stories. I care less about the hundreds of thousands of views than I care about the specific view of the DM of like something that I find on the internet and then I put on Instagram stories and like 5 people go, thank you for sharing that. That hit really well. For me, that's impactful. That's why I do the things that we do. And that's why we're grateful for this community. And we can't wait for the show, Matt. Congratulations, and keep us posted on what's going down. Steven Swiderski, who are you? What are you working on? And tell us a story, or give some storytelling tips. It's always good to go back when I first forced you to be uncomfortable.
Oh, jeez.
What are you doing now? He's doing full skits on. If you guys aren't following Cali BBQ, Vince, shout out to Vince on our Cali BBQ team. But he has Steven and our entire staff doing full Instagram skits, TikTok skits, YouTube skits. Go for it, Steven.
First of all, I invited Vince. He said he couldn't make it. Kind of bummed on that one.
And we'll get him on. We'll get him on soon.
He said he'll be here next Friday, so I'm gonna hold him.
We're not very good at planning. We kind of throw our guests under the bus. Like, hey, by the way, I know you're not doing anything on a Wednesday at 10 a.m. So just come and join this live show. What are the questions? There are no questions.
No questions.
We're building the plane. We're building the plane as we're flying it. Let's
Absolutely. I'm Steven Swiderski. I'm the director of events and hospitality at Cali BBQ. What I'm working on is landing more catering clients. I'm booking about 8 weddings in the next 2 months, so that's a big thing right there. Start the year off strong. Shawn, what story should I start with? The first news appearance?
You could always start with the first news appearance. That's one of my favorites.
It's one of my favorites too. First news appearance with Shawn. I had no experience doing anything on the news. I'm not the greatest speaker. Back then I wasn't. Now I'm better. First probably time on camera, I pretended to be the security for our wedding barbecue bean recipe on live TV. That was fun. Never have a resting face, and never put the perspective that exactly what Shawn's looking like right now. I'm not a security guard. I'm a fun barbecue guy.
Dude, we're on live TV. Can you smile? I'm not forcing you to be here. I mean, I guess I technically am forcing you to be there, but at least let's put some hospitality into that. Like you're too nice of a person, Steven, to be looking so angry on camera.
I didn't know what to do, but now I do. I'm in the position now when Shawn's in Bulgaria or out of state, I can take a whole barbecue segment by myself and be perfectly fine and comfortable.
That is one of my favorite stories, was getting Steven and our team to a place where I'm able to go to Bulgaria, to the village, and know that Steven can go and handle his own, represent Cali BBQ, talk about our catering, talk about the community that we're building. And I can watch it on the internet live, watching KUSI from Bulgaria, knowing how far you've come. So great work, Steven. We're proud of you.
Thank you, guys.
You've taken
Uh,
security cameras to a whole new level.
yeah,
Instead of watching the
Exactly.
store, you literally have people pulling out filming. That's game within the game again,
the
Shawn.
game within the game, Jason. That's how we do it. Jason, go for it. Kick us off. Tell us a story, Rabbi Berkowitz.
So years ago, I went back to go play with my old college band in New York City. And we were living in a loft in Williamsburg, Brooklyn, long before this was cool, Williamsburg, Brooklyn. And we rented a loft where there was basically no heat and no AC. And we would walk the mile from the L train, and I would run inside and run downstairs and jump under the covers. And I would turn on the hair dryer to literally warm myself up to thaw myself out from getting home. But we could jam to all hours of the night in Brooklyn, so it was worth it. Nothing like literally seeing your breath as you're getting into the shower, which was next to the kitchen sink because it was all locked. And the one night I woke up because it was extra cold in a freezing place. And I went upstairs and I noticed that the door was open and my lead singer was passed out on the couch and the dog was gone. And we had a dog there and you had to run down the steps. And so I run around, I throw on my clothes and my boots and I go running around Diego and I find him and I get him back in and I wake up the singer and I'm like, what are you doing? He's like, oh my God, I must have just passed out. I'm so sorry. And so like, cool, right? A few days later, son of a bitch does it again. And dog goes, I run outside, I'm freezing, uh, dog's peeing. I swear it was freezing by the time it left him. And like, got him back in. And I'm like, what are you doing? And he was like, Burko, you gotta stop nagging me, man. Like, don't nag me about this. And in this moment, I was like, oh my God, you're right. Like I'm that guy. I'm your hall monitor. This is not who I want to be. And I was apologizing. And from the loft above, because we like built lofts inside lofts, right? Abandoned girlfriends. The drummer's girlfriend at the time leans over. She's like, you're out of your mind. To the singer, right? Keeping names aside from it. She's like, Jason's not the jerk for nagging you. You are, because you keep putting him in a position that he's got to run upstairs, run outside, grab the dog, close the door. Like, what are you doing? And she's like, I got to stop this right now, Jason. You do not apologize for that. Like, this is all what he put you in. And I'm like, you're absolutely right. And I realized at that moment that sometimes we take on this burden where we feel bad for managing somebody or trying to work, change somebody's habits. And I wasn't the jerk in that moment. We have to remember that people put us in a position that we have to respond to them and react to what they're doing. And I started to think about how that was with management and being an employee and how that translates into everything that we're doing. As long as we set the clear expectations, like don't leave the goddamn door open in the middle of winter for the dog to run out in a place with no heat or no AC, then we know where the responsibility lies. And that story is within this story. I told that story randomly at a restaurant opening to a group of new employees that were starting, where I was just like, this is this. And I call it the dog, the door, and the jerk, and figure out who the jerk is in this scenario. Right. And
Framing is important for storytelling. I love it.
And this is the story, the dog, the door, and the jerk. And we went through and told this story. And I can't tell you how many people just came up to me afterwards and afterwards. And I love that story. And then later, somebody did something and they were like, I was the jerk, wasn't I? And they started to own it in how they were working together. And they were absolutely owning who this was based on how we set this up. So I was like, all right, I'm going to have fun with this. And I tell the story differently, the theme differently, which was I was an opening band. We were on tour, and the opening band we were with kept running a little bit late. And I finally kept telling him, like, you gotta get off stage. Come on. And he snapped at me. And I told the story, similar story all the way through about the opening band. And every time the room fell flat. and no one cared the same way. I thought it was cooler, because an opening band sucks when they keep going into your time, especially if you brought them on the bill. Screw you. Like, right? Now you're putting, like, we're drinking together and I got to tell you, get off the stage. I got to go and like do my signals. Like, F off. Yeah. No one liked that story as much as they liked
I
the
like that
dog
story.
peeing on the side of the street. Which one do you like better?
I like them both, Jason.
But, and
I
so,
like them
Jason,
both.
did you find the dog? That's what I want to
yeah,
know.
That
each
is
time, Diego, he went on tour with us. So the story, I tell these two stories within the story to say, I had no idea that first one was going to resonate. So you got to listen to people who are listening to you and see what really lands. Secondly, be aware and be ready to be like, I don't know why, but that one worked and that one didn't. So I'm going to go back to this one. And as Shawn says, I'm going to continue to tell it and get better at it. Now, I haven't told that story in 5 years, 6 years, 7 years. So that's maybe
I've known you. I've never heard about the dog, the door, and the jerk.
the dog, the door, and the jerk. So
But now I'll
it's
always remember the dog, the door. I mean, it's amazing. It's absolutely amazing when you bring that up, Jason. Like we were in a manager meeting yesterday, and Dave, our general manager, our new general manager, we're talking about culture, and he's talking about, Shawn, you should be using Arrow Up training to tell the orange tree story.
really.
And literally. And how would he know
Trying
about
to
the orange
get
tree
Dave
story?
on here as well, Shawn.
100%. He wouldn't know about the orange tree story if I didn't share it with this community, and I didn't
Yeah.
start talking about it more because it resonates. The
Yeah.
dog, the door, and the jerk. I need more
The-
dog, door, and jerk.
So that one works, right? And so we've got to listen to what resonates and then lean into that story and get better at it. That's my story within the story for today's storytelling.
Fantastic, Jason Berkowitz. Hildy, you're up.
Hello.
What's up?
I'm up. I'm Europe. So I am the storyteller of the group, but I guess I didn't realize it. There's this nonprofit that started in the 90s called The Moth. And they've got the Moth Radio Hour and they've got a podcast. And it was kind of cool. So I'm going to tell a story about the story. So it was these buddies from camp who grew up, and they used to get together in the summers and sit around a campfire and tell stories. And one day, I guess they were maybe drinking while they were enjoying themselves in their bros code. And they said, I wonder what it would be like if we collected everybody's true stories. And at that time, there were all kinds of moths flying towards the light of the fire. So they decided to name it the moth, which most people don't know how the moth got its name. But what they do now is all over the world, they put microphones in theaters. There's a little bit of a set, like you can't go more than 5 minutes. You can't have anything in your hands. You can't tell a poem or sing a song. And they have a timer. So there's always a theme. So, for example, this month, the theme is Love Hurts. And if you go on the moth.org right now, I know they have one in the San Diego area. Once a month, they have it in England. They have it in South America, everywhere, all over the world. They
One
want to.
second. Steven, can you mute?
They have
Yeah,
and
go
what
for it.
they do
Sorry,
is
Hildy.
they record video as well as audio of these 5 minutes, and then people in the audience volunteer. If they don't know anybody who's going to be telling a story, you can be a judge, and you're supposed to score anywhere from a 7, because you should get at least a 7 if you've got the balls to get up on stage, right, and tell a story. And so from 7.0 to 10.0, and one person wins. And then at the end of the year, they kind of have a final. Here in Atlanta, every single month, it sells out within a few days of the tickets going on sale. It's very inexpensive. It's $17.50. The Moth is based from New York City. They have storytelling classes. They go into schools and teach. You can pay to learn how to be a good storyteller. I would say everyone on this call are excellent storytellers. And how do I know? I don't hear any of us doing, and like, and To me, those are not good storytellers. Good storytellers usually have a beginning, a middle, and an end. if it's a 5-minute story, there should be breaths, meaning I don't want to hear a sad story for 5 minutes. So if you have to tell a sad story, make sure you've incorporated something that will give everybody a breath. That's funny. Or, oh, wow, that's really cool. Or something they can walk away with. And it's a beautiful way to do it, whether you're doing it based on restaurants or food or how you make money or just something that happened in your life. Again, love hurts could be something that you love food or you love the restaurant you're in, but it hurt, whether you broke a leg or whether a reviewer came in and broke your heart. So I'm really passionate about storytelling. I do go every month. I haven't won yet, but I have a goal, and I'm manifesting that this Monday night I'm actually driving to Birmingham, Alabama to participate because I am now a full-time volunteer at the Moth Atlanta. And I was told this month I'm not allowed to tell a story if I'm volunteering because they're afraid that when people see a volunteer, they might give me better grades. So I'm going to go Monday night and I'm going to try in Birmingham, Alabama. And then going forward, if I want to tell a story, I just won't volunteer that night. But if anybody has any questions, I'm really passionate about storytelling and I'm very proud of everybody on these calls twice a week. I think we are all gifted, whether we know it or not. Okay, Shawn, I'm going to shut up now.
Awesome. Thank you. Appreciate it. Dave, welcome to the community, Dave. You've been a longtime listener. Couple times I think you've joined us. Can you unmute and tell us?
Yes,
There
I
you
just
go.
unmute. Okay.
Perfect.
Thanks,
Riverside's
Stephen,
gonna
for
cooperate.
showing me how to get into. I didn't realize I needed a new app. I was listening. What would you like to know? Storytelling. That's the topic today.
Tell us a story about how you learned about Cali BBQ. That would be a good story for
That
the
is an
community.
awesome one. Yes. For those who don't know, I work with Shawn and the crew at Cali BBQ, and it goes back 8 years. Although I've only been working 7 months. I discovered these guys. I was in Santa Fe, New Mexico. My wife and I had a couple of restaurants. I did a lot of smoking. And Shawn's original podcast, Behind the Smoke, with Derek up at Valley Farm Market, was that like 7, 8 years ago? Is that right, Shawn?
Yeah, it was 2017 is when we launched that show.
Okay, so I was doing my research and listening to podcasts on smoking. And my daughter was out here in San Diego. And I was like, oh, we got to go down to the Cali BBQ when we come to visit. And of course, my daughter is like way out there in East County. So we took the 10-minute drive. And we discovered Shawn in the restaurant, and also had to go to Valley Market, Farm Market, where they were recording with his buddy up there. And long story short, 2.5 years ago, we sold the restaurants and house in Santa Fe. We moved out to San Diego, and I've been following Shawn and Cali BBQ, and I saw they were opening up new location. I was like, oh, that'd be fun. I thought I was done with the restaurant business because, 30 years in that, couple years of COVID. We've all been there. I was like, this is bullshit. I'm done. But then I have a passion for barbecue. I reached out to Shawn, and here I am, 7 months later, as part of the team, helping out at both restaurants. And it's funny how it just comes around. I just followed him 7, 8 years ago when he was getting started in this world, and look where it's come. I mean, your story, my story, they just all come together here, and then for this great community. So thanks for what you do for the community, Shawn. That's something I just want to give you a shout out, bringing us all together. For people like me who who thought they were done with the community, but here I am again. So it's great being part of the restaurant world again.
Dave, I'm so grateful that you're part of the team, the work that you're doing with Steven and with Lisa and with Caesar, helping Eric and Howard. Like, I mean, when people ask you what's the ROI of doing a podcast and putting all this time and all this effort into storytelling, this community, these calls, the people that we get to meet, it's not for the hundreds of thousands, millions of views. It's not for any of that. It's for the actual humans that we get to connect with. So thank you for coming on today's call. Let's go.
Of course.
Let's go over to Michael.
Hi there. I'm getting a little bit of shaky. I don't know if it's me or you guys. Can you hear me okay?
No, it's Riverside. We're having fun. We're trying to test Riverside's bandwidth.
Yeah, we're testing it. I was going to go a little academic on the storytelling, if that's okay. So I have
Please.
been in a business philosophy course since like 2001, and about 3 years in, the teacher is a mentor of mine and a friend now, and retired. Started working business narratives with us, and we're all sitting in there going, "What are we learning this for? I don't know what this is about." And one of the things is we had to memorize all the elements of the exposition, and then he would randomly call on 100 of us could be called on, and we had 30 seconds to be able to recite them. And we were sitting there going, why are we learning this? And we kind of realized this is stuff we learned back in 6th grade. It's the plot mountain, this speaker, champion, minor actor, major actor, adversary, current situation starts action, conflict, resolution, and one. And we were like learning this stuff. And what we realized is, he goes, on a biological level, human beings are always searching for meaning. They're always trying to assess what does something mean. And meaning, sort of defined is where the actions we are in sort of intersect with the things we care about, right? So like when we're a little kid, we see this little red squiggly thing and we try to touch it and we realize that means ouch, it's fire, it hurts, and we assign meaning to that and we know better. And we do it all the way through all our lives, right? I'm driving around and go, what do those clouds mean? Is it going to rain? And you're always trying to figure out meaning. Stories and storytelling is a way and a methodology to assign meaning to things. And when we don't control that story and every part of it, people make up their own meaning. So like I'm at the point, I don't know if you can see this, but I have all these, here's the elements of the exposition. I literally have it in a chalkboard all the time in my office because I work through it all the time as we're designing, like who's holding all these different parts and how do we have a complete narrative and where are there missing parts that someone might fill in. And so like for us, and this is where our TV show eventually evolved from, is we realized as social media started coming out that people were telling stories about us. They had no idea who we were. They thought we were like a swap meet, like the Mercado Negro down in Ensenada, like the seafood swap meet, black market it's called. And I'm like, where did they come up with this crazy stories? But we weren't telling the story. We were letting people tell it. And when social media started popping up, it became really obvious that these stories were spreading. Nobody knew who the real ownership was. Nobody knew who the family was. Nobody knew the history of the business. And I'm sitting there going, I do, because we've been around for decades and I know all these stories. No one wanted to talk about them. So as we started to kind of experiment and throw them into social media shorts and then professionally produce them, eventually that became what we're known now as Kings of Fish. And it allowed us to control the story, control the narrative, and actually produce results with it in a way that we couldn't do before. So when Shawn and I met, he's talking about storytelling. I'm doing that. And the interesting part is, people will walk right into your story and they would love to be part of it, but they might not necessarily like be able to zoom out and see it like strategically what it means and how it's being put together. So I dig it. It's like the funnest thing for me. I hate being in operations. I hate HR. No offense to our HR people. I hate all that stuff. I'm glad we have people to do it. But if I had to choose, it's always marketing, advertising, storytelling, because it's where you get to be creative and exercise that creative muscle and really get to make the business fun. One of the other things that was interesting is I didn't realize for a long time, we brought this consultant in for a totally unrelated reason, but it went in a direction I didn't see. He said, bring in your leadership team. And at the time, I don't have a leadership team. I have a family business, a bunch of random people, because we're going to go through this exercise and I just want people that understand your business. So I actually brought like 20 people because normally I only deal with 3 or 4. I'm like, well, I don't know how to bring in. I mean, these are all our managers. Some have been for 20 or 30 years. And I don't know that we're all going to have different answers to the questions you ask. And this exercise we banged out in I think 5 hours would normally take some 3 days, which kind of blew me away. And it was an exercise about what we came up with is what's your value proposition. But what was interesting about it is I realized that our team members that have been with us a long time never had the opportunity to tell the stories that they hear from our customers and that they're telling to our customers and that they tell each other. And when we created that space for them to speak and share, I was like, man, I did not see that. I was so busy just looking at P&Ls and all the other crap that you're dealing with and the ownership side and the profitability that you didn't understand what the story people had. And one of the ones that really threw me was the amount of people that come in and say, I used to come here and visit when I was a little kid with my parents, and now I've got my kids with me and my parents and my grandparents, and in some cases even their grandkids. Just that they wanted to share the stories that they had made up about their experience with us. And now with us in the parking lot that we've now been in for almost 2 freaking years, so it's only supposed to be 6 months, we've really had to change our storytelling strategy, because I noticed in a recent meeting with our operations team, why are sales down? We got to invent new menu items. And I'm like, hold on, guys, just a second. I appreciate innovation, and it's super important to have it, and it's like a core value for the business, but we don't have to reinvent the wheel. We have 60 years of customers. Their building was taken away. It wasn't just our building, it was theirs too. And they're waiting for us to come back because they want to revisit what they had before. They don't want something new. They're not going to come back for something new. So figure out how to bring back all the things that they miss in this parking lot and then the next space until we can rebuild everything. And as you were reading through our social media posts and some of the things we were doing with like different like food influencers online, I'm reading all the comments and they're mostly negative. And the negativity was, it's not the same. So bring it back. And I think that was missing for people. And that was a really fundamental part of the story. It wasn't about create something new and try to get them back. It was give them back what they're missing, because they already have the story. We just need to fill it in for them. So I'll stop there.
No, I love the fact when you bring the family together and you get all the different perspectives of the stories that you guys didn't know.
Yeah.
And I think that's a problem on all company levels. It doesn't matter how small, if you're a solo practitioner, if you have, a medium-sized company or a publicly traded company, when the marketing team isn't talking to the sales team, isn't talking to the leadership team. I mean, one of my favorite stories about media is I read in a sports business magazine way back in the day, a case study on ESPN2. So ESPN2 is the channel. Obviously, ESPN1 is a very successful channel, but there was a time when ESPN2 was really struggling and about to go bankrupt. And what they actually purchased was the X Games. So they purchased the X Games, which is all the extreme sports, skateboarding, snowboarding, all these things all packaged into one. But what they did when they purchased the X Games, because they didn't have space for them, they put them all into one building. And it was the first time at the media side of ESPN and ESPN2 that they had event people, salespeople, marketing people, production people, all in one building, talking about stories, talking about what they were building, and sharing and collaborating on ideas that really helped them not only improve ESPN2, but also improve ESPN.
So that's great.
Richard Liverman. I don't know, Mike, do you hear that feedback?
Yeah, I do. What's odd too is everybody's muted and it's still there. So
there
I'm not
anybody
sure where
that's-
it's coming from. But if we could all mute at the same time, and it was still popping through. So I'm not sure really what that feedback is, but I am hearing it.
Cool. Richard Liverman, story time from the other side of the pond.
I love stories. And I think one of the things that is amazing is Facebook changed storytelling. We used to go and meet people in the pub, a tavern or a bar for you North American guys. There's a little bit where it made storytelling fashionable again. And we love sharing stories. And I think what's really interesting is the stories that we love are true stories. And I think what's fascinating for me is I've worked with a number of clients and they tell people that the story that they're the hero. And this is where you need to correct people. You're not the hero. You help the hero on their journey. And there's Donald Miller's story brand. You'll probably recognize some of the terminology here. That what's really interesting listening to Michael speak, for instance, is that the customer's the hero. The thing that they're missing is like the thing that they know. And that how can you help the hero on their journey? And you were talking about, doing the weddings. You're not the hero. Cali BBQ's not the hero, but you help the hero by feeding them. The same with what Jason does. He helps people become better. I think what's really interesting when I look at, and I always go on about don't be boring, don't be boring. What's really interesting for me when I look at so many people's websites or marketing, it's boring because you're telling people what it is you do. How do you help people? Why do you do it? And I think there's this little bit where the stories where people are going, me, boring. I like, tell us something interesting. And to Hildy's point, stories don't need to be long. I mean, true stories are great, but stories don't need to be long. And I'm going to leave you with a 6-word story. For sale, baby shoes, never worn. And Tell stories. That's it. Tell stories. Tell great stories. Tell true stories. They don't need to be big. They don't need to be long. They just need to be interesting. And the really interesting stories are the ones where a hero goes on a journey. How did they get to that point? What's the problem? How's it solved? The boring stories are, oh, yeah, look at me. Aren't I great? Boring, 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 boring. Great stories are the ones that people share. Great stories are the ones that, you want to share with your friends. So last night, find another final one for me. Sorry, Shawn, I'm doing two for the
No,
price of one.
please. I have follow-up questions for you.
I went to one of my favourite restaurants in London last night. I walked Elizabeth past it last year, and it's called Chicken and Sours. And it's the one where I've shown you the poster before it,
Wait,
and
what?
they've got on a
Chicken and what?
chalkboard.
Chicken and
Chicken
what?
and Sours.
What kind of sours? What are we talking about?
Cocktails.
Sours?
And sours, chicken and sours. You get
Did you
fried
know
chicken
that?
and sour cocktails.
Did anyone else on this call know that sours?
Oh man, do you know what? I'm going to put the website in the chat. You can
Sours?
Google it.
You call
Cocktails.
sours or cocktails? You don't have
Yeah.
sweet cocktails? You only have
We
sour
have sweet
cocktails?
cocktails, but this restaurant does sour ones. Just stick with me.
Okay.
They also do a whole fried chicken. They get a whole chicken and fry it. It's amazing. They are amazing. But what I love about them is they're all about storytelling. So when you get your bill, your check. When you get the bill check, whatever you call it, it actually comes in a giant egg cup, and you open up the egg cup, and there's the bill check, whatever
What's
you
an
call it.
egg cup?
An egg cup, like an egg cup.
A carton of eggs?
No, I'm going to get a picture and show you in a minute. I'll go
Does
and get
anyone
one
know
out
what
of
an
the
egg
picture.
cup is?
This is where you put boiled egg in.
An egg cup. Okay.
Oh,
A boiled egg, a one boiled egg into an egg cup.
Do you know what I'm going to do? Right, I'm going to. This is your Christmas present sorted. Elizabeth's going to try and draw it now. Giant egg, and in the egg is your bill, and then within that, thank you.
Nicely done. See, we got gifts getting made in real life right now.
What I love about it is they also give you tattoos.
Jason's blown away.
What I also love is they give you tattoos. And with this tattoo, what's really fun about it is you stick it on you and you post it on social media, and one person a month wins a free dinner. Great. And what I like about it is there are all these stories that you can share about the food. There's all the stories you can share about the atmosphere in the restaurant. And then they actually encourage you to share their stories in the form of a temporary tattoo. And what I love about it, instead of being another fried chicken restaurant, it's full of personality where you, as a consumer, want to share their stories. And I think there's that little bit where if they went, look at us, we're great. No, they give you the equipment to help tell their story. Storytelling is fundamental to businesses. Do it wrong, it's boring. Do it well, the whole world knows about fried chicken in London.
Before I let you go, tell us a story about the quote. Every time you bring up the quote, I'm happy that you bring it up because it's so powerful. The 6 word.
Oh, the 6 word. For sale, baby shoes, never worn.
Who wrote it?
6 word story. 6 word story. And Ernest Hemingway claimed it, but it wasn't written by him. He told it. And I think there's that little bit where people think that stories have to be big and long. They just need to be powerful, interesting, cause emotion, curiosity. If not, they're just a bit boring.
One of my favorites is "Can you hear me now?" Was it Sprint or whatever
Verizon.
commercial? Can you hear me now? Verizon commercial. Yeah. I mean, it's like, well, can you hear me now? It's like so simple, but everybody knew what it meant.
Yeah, brilliant campaign for sure. Elizabeth, thank you for the illustration. For those that watched on video, that's the power of watching on YouTube. You can see Elizabeth draw illustrations live during our calls. That's a new feature that we'll be rolling out soon. Whenever Richard describes something, you just have to draw it, a Pictionary.
That could get dangerous, I think. Oh, that's hilarious. No, I'm so enjoying the conversation. And so one thing I wanted to bring up was this, because I've been working with a new client, and she's a broker for a real estate agency. And one thing we've been talking about is one of the best ways for her to show how she supports her team is through the stories of things that have gone wrong, things that have gone well, things where she was able to support them. And so we've been trying to video her stories so that people can understand what they get when they get her. So anyway, but the idea of that also is, how do you bridge a story into the lesson learned? And I've been using ChatGPT to do this, because I'm like, okay, I have this story that I want to tell, but this is the topic that I want to talk about. Can you help me bridge that? And so I have a story that I'm going to tell, but as I was looking at it, I was thinking, if Jason told this story, the lesson learned would be something completely different than what I would talk about in my field. And so, if you'll bear with me, let me tell you a story. Thank you, Shawn, for that.
Right.
But my sister was a lifeguard for many years, and she worked at a lake. In the summer, she would lifeguard at this lake. She would one of her tasks was to rotate through. One was the seat was on the dock, and the kids were allowed to come out on the dock and jump off the end of it into the lake and that type of thing. But one of the main rules was, do not run on the dock. And so, she's there with her whistle, and if she would see the kids coming down the dock, she could see which ones were running, because if they slip and fall and hurt themselves, it's just not good. And so she would blow her whistle and say, stop running. And if they had more than one infraction, she would make them sit out right at her stand for 10 minutes or 5 minutes or whatever. Well, she was watching, and she saw this little ponytail bobbing down the dock. She blew her whistle and pointed, and all the kids stopped and looked at her. And she said, "You stop running." It was this little girl. And she was like, okay. Well, just like not even a minute or two later, same ponytail, same little girl running, like coming down the dock. Mary blows the whistle and makes everybody stop. They all turn. It's at this moment that she realizes that this little girl only has one leg. And so she wasn't running, she was hopping down the dock, and then she saw the prosthetic leg on the beach with her parents. In this whole moment, in this crisis management moment, she turns to some other random little boy and says, you sit out. And so he sits down, and all the kids start playing again. He's like, what did I do? And so she gets on the walkie-talkie. She said, can somebody please come and get me? Because anyway, to switch out. But the point of this story is, sometimes we make assumptions about what's going on when we're not paying attention and taking all of the details into account. Now, for me, so that's the lesson of the story. But for me to bridge that into social media, I could say sometimes we assume that everybody knows the story, knows the products, the services that we offer. But if we're not getting out there and telling them, then they're just going to see a ponytail bobbing. They're not actually going to see what's actually going on. But I was thinking of Jason using this lesson learned in his form, is when you go after somebody in a work setting and you're assuming that they're giving you attitude because of some reason, and you're not taking the time to find out what's really going on, and you just react instead of respond to what's going on. So anyway, the idea of how can you start making this list of these major stories in your life, just keeping it on your phone, and then saying, how can I bridge this into a conversation or use it as an example to help concrete the idea of, if you see a ponytail bobbing, there may be more to the story than what you're saying. So I'll hand it back to you, Shawn.
That's fantastic. And I think that's some of the best advice that I try to give myself, but also other people that appear on podcasts, is don't answer the question. Like, I mean, so many times we go to conferences and there's panels and people are sitting up there talking about platitudes, talking about the industry. Just stop and bring us into a story. Because if you bring us into a story, it'll be so much more powerful than anything else.
There's
and it's
also
hard.
the curse of knowledge, isn't there, Shawn? There's
What's
this
that?
little bit where we're telling everybody about how great we are, we're slapping ourselves on the back, boring. But there's also the bit where the curse of knowledge is, we expect everybody to know what we know, and we think that, should we share our story because we know it? Well, doesn't mean the rest of the world does. And I think there's something that, and I'm going to embarrass Elizabeth here like I did on Wednesday. You need to go back and rewatch that. Solera, she goes purple. There's this brilliant moment where we assume that what we do is really ordinary. Our ordinary is somebody else's extraordinary. And I think there's that little bit where we think that some of our stories are ordinary, but actually they're extraordinary, including Jason and the missing dog.
Couldn't. Well said. So well said, Mike.
Also, I
Yes.
was going to use this as a tape. I'm going to do it now. Don't let the truth get in the way of a perfectly good story. Now, my story is true. It is true, but don't let the truth get in the way of a perfectly good story.
And the truth also vibrates the fastest. So don't be afraid. Don't be afraid to share the truth, because that's what typically will make me stop scrolling. It will make me pay attention when people get real, when they get raw, when they start to share real, true facts about, I mean, specific details. I would say specifics allow you to bring yourself in to go, that's very specific. And if you're very specific, you're probably pretty true. Mike,
What's
you're
that?
up.
Don't say car when you could say Oldsmobile,
That's right.
is the old saying.
Yeah.
Yeah, no, I felt like I had to jump in here from the producer side.
You can always jump in.
I was
Stover,
like,
Mike, you guys know this is a team.
Yeah.
This is a team event.
It was, Matt, when you were talking about before about starting your show and your podcast, so excited to check it out and listen. And Shawn, you had mentioned, which I think resonates and is really important to me, is, nobody has your show, nobody has your voice. So I think it's really crucial and critical to remember that. And it jogged my memory because at the time I was working at CBS Sports Radio, I was doing the morning show, and I had afternoons very free. So I wanted to get some extra income. I wanted some flexibility, and my wife had this idea: why don't you become a delivery driver? So I became an Uber Eats delivery driver. Um, I haven't done it in a while, but I will say I'm a great Uber Eats delivery driver. Like, I'm really good. Like, I had 100% satisfaction rate. I'm really good. I just loved it. Really, I don't know. But as I was doing this, I was like telling people all these wild stories that were happening. Like, oh, I did this delivery to this hotel room. You won't believe what I saw. And I was like, well, why don't I do a podcast about my deliveries? And for me, it was like, wow, this is like some of the most fun storytelling I ever did. So I wanted to just tell one story from my Uber Eats delivery experience. I went to a local bakery and I got an order for 3 cookies. Now, on the order, it didn't say what type of cookies they were. It just said it was 3 cookies. And I got the delivery. This is a while ago too, so you didn't like know where you were going. It was different on the back end. You would just like pick something up and like, let's see where I end up. And I ended up at a hotel in the afternoon. And I start driving over there, and there's signs, and it says all this New York Giants signs all over the place. I'm like, oh, okay, that's kind of cool. I'm a Giants fan. Well, what's going on here? It's right by Giant Stadium, or the dump that's now MetLife Stadium. And as I'm going there, I realize, like, oh, this is the Giants team hotel for training camp. I'm like, this is pretty cool. And the order says go to the second floor. Before I can even get there, this 6'3", 326-pound man comes flying towards me, and I hand him the cookies. And I'm like, oh, I start Googling on my phone, like, who is this guy? Who is this guy? Before I can even do that, he comes back to me and says, I'm sorry, you got my cookie order wrong. These aren't the 3 cookies I wanted. I asked for chocolate chip. These are sugar cookies. I was like, I'm sorry. The app doesn't say what type of cookies. Like, these are the only 3 cookies. And he was pissed at me, like furious, and leaves. I Google who he is. He's an offensive lineman, Jonathan Jenkins, for the Giants. I'm like, I got to take this to the next level and figure out what the hell was going on here. So I emailed the New York Giants and tell them the story. They get me a press credential to go to practice a couple days later. Get on the field. We have an interview set up after practice where I can talk to Jonathan. I went ahead and bought him the 3 right cookies, which completely melted, and were disgusting when I handed it to him. But I see him, and I'm like, I have to know, why were you so upset? And he says, I had my 3 kids upstairs, and they had been asking me all day for this specific type of cookie. And when I saw the wrong cookie, I took it out on you, but I knew what was coming for me upstairs with my kids. And, we took a nice picture together, and I interviewed him.
Wow.
But it just got me resonating, like, the connections I made from being an Uber Eats delivery driver to make like friends with the Giants, the offensive linemen. But to share these stories that happened, and document kind of what's going on in your life, is something I'll never forget. And I just think the power of storytelling is so valuable, and is so unique to what everybody's doing individually. That's one that just kind of hits home and resonates. Like, I'll never forget that moment with that Giants offensive lineman.
I am so happy you came on and shared that. That was amazing. Like
Yeah.
seriously, go for it, Jason. Yes, we can always raise our hand and ask questions.
Well, hold on before Jason
I
gets in
that
there.
is
Hold on.
there are so many lessons inside of there that I'm absolutely blown away by, and I love and the persistence in all of this. And I promised I upset Howard Solomon because I stopped swearing a long time ago when we started to live and tape this thing. But I just want to share one question for
Wait,
you
what
that
did you
can't
do?
resonate.
Wait, you told Howard you weren't going to swear?
I stopped swearing a long time ago because he used to come on for the F bombs, and I said no, I stopped that a long time ago. But I just in sort of this, you really inspired me, Mike. Who the fuck picks sugar cookies over chocolate chip cookies? If you
That's
have,
what I was gonna say. I'm
if
totally
you
with you. That was
have
my
the
takeaway.
gambit in front of you,
In the app,
what
just
the
doesn't
fuck's wrong with
say.
you? I'm sorry. I'm sorry.
It doesn't tell you. I was like, I always double check them. Like, there's 3 cookies in here, so that I verified, and just but I couldn't take that next level for them.
So
Amazing
no tip.
story. Amazing
No
job.
tip then.
What the?
No
No, the
tip.
tip
Yeah.
actually
Did you lose your rating? How did your rating do?
No, my rating was fine on that, and I think a lot of people don't go in to kind of care about it. He actually did not tip well, to be honest. I do remember that. It was like $1 or something. It wasn't good, to be honest.
How did you get a press credential? Was it for the Uber Eats podcast or was it for CBS Radio?
I'm trying to remember. I explained in my email that I did work at CBS at the time to kind of angle myself to get in there, but then said, what I was doing it for was for my personal podcast. And they set it
I
up.
can't believe they
It's
gave you a
funny.
press credential. That's fantastic.
Yeah, they gave me a press credential.
That
I
is
went into
fantastic.
practice. There's like Eli Manning there when he's not good anymore, and like it
Oh
was
my
fun. It was
gosh.
fun. I love Eli. I can say that. It was fun. It was fun. Yeah.
Eli's grown on me. I don't know. Eli and Tom Brady, 2 people that I've hated in my sports career that have made a complete 180 after they've been done.
Yeah.
Did everybody share? Let's go around and share. I need to know who's your tip, takeaway, homework assignment, but also who's your favorite storyteller or one of your favorite storytellers. Who do you draw inspiration from? Matt, go ahead and kick us off.
Jason Berkowitz is my inspiration. I love that man's stories. I would say my takeaway is that I need to come up with titles for my stories because that was the
Framing.
dog. That was amazing. I love that.
The dog, the door, and the jerk. Framing your story, the orange tree story. You got to title your stories.
I think I could remember them better as well if I had titles.
And then you get deeper in the details, and that's a great takeaway.
Second takeaway: don't pick sugar cookies. Always go chocolate chip.
Fantastic. Elizabeth, tip, takeaway, and who do you draw inspiration from storytelling?
So my family, because one of, especially my mother's side of the family, my grandmother and grandfather, my aunts, our pastime was telling stories. We had our favorites too, of my great grandfather coming home drunk, and he would throw his hat on the porch, and my great grandmother would come out, and if he could come in, then she'd leave his hat sitting there. But if she was not having it, she would kick the hat off the porch, and he would have to go sleep in the barn or sleep somewhere else. And he came up once, and she folded her arms over her chest, and she goes, "You been drinking?" And he said, "You too?" So, and we would tell stories. But what's funny to me is my nieces now, that's what they want to do when they come to my parents' table, is they have their own favorite stories that they love to retell. And so I will say just my family time. And so making sure that the stories you repeat with your children, they become a part of the lore of your family. And so getting those in there, I think that's a great way to do that. And I love the titling of your stories. That is really, really smart. Anyway, back to you, Shawn.
Awesome. Hildy, tip, takeaway, homework assignment. Who's your favorite storyteller or someone you draw inspiration from?
I got it. Okay. Tip, takeaway, homework assignment. Everybody just manifest that I win Monday night in Birmingham, Alabama, and the story Love Hurts. And if I win, I'll tell the story on here only upon request, because it is a 5-minute story, and I might maybe do a bedtime story and put Shawn to sleep. I'd like to see Shawn snore one day. All right,
No, you would not.
Great weekend.
Definitely not. Thank you, Hildy. Appreciate it. Richard, go for it.
Yeah, favorite storytellers. I love hearing my kids tell stories, and you guys need to get. I know Cam's working behind the scenes.
Yes.
His father, Robert Hardy, is an amazing storyteller, and
Really?
you really need to speak to him. He's fantastic, and Cameron will be wincing when he hears this.
What should we ask him? What stories should he? What's the title of the stories that we
You
should
can ask him about the time when I passed out underneath the lorry. That's a good story. But I'm not telling that on camera. Rob Hardy's got some amazing stories, and what I've learned from him is delivery. I've learned so much from him about storytelling, and I think it's absolutely fantastic. And I think I always say that I love watching masters at work, and I'm not referring to the DJ duo from New York. It's watching people at the top of their game. And there's something about whether you go to a theater, whether you go and watch a great film, like what are those amazing storytellers that you can learn from? And I'm absolutely devouring Donald Miller, Storybrand.
Yep.
There's so much. My takeaway would be go read that book.
Yep.
Because you'll suddenly realize you're not the hero of the story.
Amazing. Thank you, Richard. Dave, tip, takeaway, homework assignment?
Takeaway, make the stories about others. People are interested in themselves. They don't care about you. I mean, they care about you, but if you make it about them, they'll listen. That's my takeaway. Hildy, good luck. I love the Moth Radio Hour. I listen to their podcast all the time. I'll have to search around for some of your stories, hopefully. Storytellers. I love storytelling. I guess I'm kind of old. And some of you out there might know Zig Ziglar, old school salesperson, connects with people, down to earth, those kind of stories. That's what I resonates with. So thanks,
Amazing.
Shawn.
Thanks, Dave. Appreciate you for being here. Mike, tip, takeaway, homework assignment, storyteller.
It's Mike. I'm not sure which mic I'm going to go.
Yeah, you go.
I was thinking about my my dad grew up with 3 best friends who I consider uncles because none of them had brothers, and listening to the stories they tell about that era of growing up through the 40s, 50s, 60s, and 70s and 80s, like what it took to build a business, what it was like when it was just a front for gambling and some of the other nefarious things that they were involved with, not knowing any better as children. It's like I like people don't believe these stories because no one else in my social circle of friends that I've grown up with grew up with any kind of a background like that. But in my hometown, it was much more common than I was aware of. So I dig that stuff.
I hope you tell that more. I hope you tell that more, Mike. It's actually when I first met you at Stephen Ronow's lunch, the leadership lunch. That was one of the first things that I remembered you talking about, because I don't know if you felt uneasy talking about it, but like you told it, and I was like, I love this guy because he's actually talking about something that is true in his family, something that people wouldn't typically talk about in business. But it's like,
no,
hey, that's part of our family history.
Well, I think all the people who'd be a threat died, so it might be safe now. I don't know. We'll find out.
Awesome. Appreciate you, Mike. Biseglia.
Yeah, I think be authentic and be yourself with your storytelling, I think, is always a great route to go. And I love what you just said, Richard, about your kids. My son's 4 now, and he's starting to tell stories. So I love hearing his stories, and then storyteller, probably my dad, and I like the connections when he's telling my son the stories. So we'll keep it family.
That's awesome. Elizabeth, she's got the Richard and the Lori. With Richard, you're definitely not boring underneath the truck, Richard.
I was very, very, very hungover, but I'm not telling that story on camera.
Elizabeth, why don't you wrap it up?
Oh, I think I already went.
Oh, you went. Okay.
Yeah.
Well, I appreciate everybody for listening. My favorite storyteller actually is probably my wife. So Rositza, she doesn't get enough love, but having met her and she didn't know English and she learned English and we traveled to Bulgaria. So a lot of the stories that we have as a family, she has to translate them from English into Bulgarian, but she does such a good job of bringing both cultures together. And I think that's something that I thoroughly enjoy, and it's something that I hadn't even thought about until we had this call. But shout out to Rositza. on being a master storyteller. And thank you for all of you. You're all phenomenal storytellers. Every Wednesday, every Friday. Mike, what's our show next Wednesday?
So next Wednesday, Elizabeth will be guest hosting, and it was a topic inspired from last Friday about the whispers as a kid. You know, what were those moments that inspired you for where you're going and where you are today? And Elizabeth will be hosting that.
Awesome. Appreciate it. And anybody that's listening, go to betheshow.media/rising tides. We want more people, more storytellers, more hospitality professionals, marketers, salespeople to join our calls. Jason, Mike, Richard, Elizabeth, Matt, Hildy, Dave, and everybody that joined us. Have an awesome Friday. Go tell some more stories. Go title your stories. Title them, frame them, tell them. Thank you all. You guys have a great one.
See y'all.
And that's a wrap. We did it. We made it through Riverside.
We're clear.
Oh, Riverside. Oh, Riverside. Oh, Riverside.
I think Elizabeth should do hers next week on Cracker Barrel.